Quite frankly, I know we're all in this room because the subject area is hugely important. We have a panel of experts. You have their detailed bios in the handout, so I won't read them, but I do want to make an observation. This is a subject which I suspect we've given a lot of thought to, even if it hasn't been a formal process of thinking through the challenges in the community. But I will tell you this, from the perspective of AARP, it's kind of fascinating to me. I was told when I first became state director that AARP does a lot of work in research and advocacy, obviously. But one of the challenges is that we have, as we get older, all sorts of issues that come with the physical and the aging challenges that are, for lack of a better term, body parts that are giving us problems, right? And multiple chronic illnesses and all of that. And AARP doesn't want to go there too hard because, of course, aging is about living well. We know that, we tell ourselves that, and frankly, it's the right approach to aging in almost every respect, including public policy. But there's also things that we need to talk about as well when it comes to aging that have a lot to do with some of the challenges that we don't even think through for aging when you're dealing with loss of vision. I think about the fact that of the 800,000 members of AARP in Massachusetts, even if you apply a very low percentage, which frankly is not the case, but even at a low percentage, there are huge numbers of people in this state right now who are struggling with newly acquired vision issues. And unlike some of the folks that we work with and respect and have dealt with those vision challenges from the earliest age, the newness of this vision loss is an assault in almost every way, and most of that challenge has almost nothing to do with the physical. It has to do with the compounding of the other challenges that we face. And I often think, and I know Alice, one of our panelists, is very much in tune with this issue. We want people to stay at home as long as possible because we know that people want to stay at home as long as possible. But if you're at home and you're alone, if you're at home and you are isolated, if you're at home struggling with vision loss and you are not engaged, then all sorts of other things are happening in your life that are not good. And this panel is a focused attention on that very question of how do we, first of all, recognize the challenge and how do we deal with the facilitator in that conversation at the end of this session. How do we get to strategies and policies that are going to get right into that challenge and do constructive things to make it better for the people we care so much about? So without further ado, I want to introduce first Rebecca Alexander. She has an extraordinary story. Like I say, I'm not going to take any more time because I know you know who she is. You read that bio and it's overwhelmingly impressive. So I'm going to ask you, Rebecca, as you sit there at the end of the table, to plunge right in. Talk to us about your experiences and address those questions about how the challenge really deals with the whole life experiences that you've had.
Thank you for having me. I'm really thrilled to be here. I flew in from New York this morning. I have something called Usher syndrome, type 3. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Usher syndrome, it is the combined vision and hearing loss together. There are 3 types. Type 1, you're born completely deaf and you're losing your vision. Type 2, you're born with a set amount of hearing loss and you're losing your vision. And type 3, which is what I have the most recently identified, is the progressive loss of both. So I was very fortunate that my hearing loss I had a cookie bite of hearing loss when I was younger, in my childhood years. And I really didn't lose my hearing or start to lose it until I was about 19. So for that reason, I'm very fortunate to not have affected speech. I'm now cochlear implanted on one side, and I have a hearing aid on the other, so I'm a hybrid. So the vision part of what I have is retinitis pigmentosa, and I'm assuming that because we're here at the Solutions Insight Summit that everybody knows what RP is, right? So just to give you a sense of what my vision is like, I have donut vision. Most of us know RP as tunnel vision. Donut vision is where you have your outermost periphery here, so I can see my hands out here. I can't see my hands, I can't see my hands, I can't see my hands, I can see my hands. So I have about 10 degrees of my centralmost vision. The reason why I tell you is because when someone tells me they have a disability, my first instinct is to wonder what they can and can't see, what they can and can't hear, what they can and can't do, and how I can try to understand their experience best. So, on top of having Usher syndrome, I'm a psychotherapist in New York City. And I specialize in anxiety, but I treat a lot of people with both vision and hearing loss. The aging population tend to love me because I'm a wealth of knowledge and information when it comes to hearing aids, when it comes to retinal specialists, when it comes to cochlear implants. So I'm happy to answer any questions from a consumer perspective on that end. But I think what's different for people who are aging and dealing with either vision and or hearing loss is that this is something that we have always had. For all intents and purposes, we've always been able to hear, or we've always been able to see until a certain age where our vision started to decline or our hearing started to decline. And when you're born without that sense, your body, your mind naturally adapts to your circumstances, and you find alternative ways of being able to acquire information. But when you've always relied on your eyes and your ears, and those start to fail you, there's a tremendous amount of anxiety, depression, sadness, denial, you name it. And for those of us who have experienced vision loss, we have experienced all of those emotions, and likely within the period of an hour sometimes.
Yeah.
So, one of the most important things I have found, not only as a psychotherapist, but also as someone who struggles with vision loss, the most important thing for me to be able to do, and this is from the beginning and throughout this entire process, because it is a process, I am gradually, progressively losing more vision. I have to mourn the loss. We must mourn the loss of what we can no longer do. And it's not the permission to have a pity party for yourself. It's the permission to acknowledge just how disappointing, how sad, how frustrating, how whatever emotion comes to you with the experience of vision loss. You must experience these emotions in order to be able to be as proactive and independent as you can. Without being able to mourn and experience those emotions, you are holding yourself back from the ability to accept your need for help. And one thing that Haben made very clear in her talk, and whenever Haben speaks, I feel like I'm just like dumbfounded because she's such an excellent speaker. But we are all interconnected. We all need help. And younger people need help, older people need help. There is nothing that people, I find, get more enjoyment out of or get more fulfillment out of than knowing they have done something to help someone else. When someone says thank you, when you help someone do something that they have difficulty doing and they thank you for helping them, there is no better feeling. And I think it's important for us, people who are visually impaired, to enable them to have that feeling by asking for help when we need it. So I'm happy to answer more questions as they come along. I wrote a memoir that came out in September of 2014. Yes. We have a few copies here. They're in regular print, so I can't even read my own book in regular print. So it's available on Kindle and whatever, and I can tell you more about that. But this last summer, I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. My best girlfriend, with 10 degrees of vision. And the higher you get up in altitude, the more your vision starts to have those flashing lights. It's quite an experience. Wow. But my best girlfriend, Caroline, accompanied me. We did the Alcatraz swim for sight. In San Francisco, we swam from Alcatraz to shore. And I don't say this to give myself a pat on the back. I say this because I'm able to do these things because I have come to a place of accepting the help that I need and asking for it. And also being able to mourn the loss of the experience of losing vision, and then being able to empower myself by finding out what resources, what is out there for me, and how I can ask others to help me.
Rebecca, that's great.
Thank you.
A big round of applause, first of all. We're definitely going to return to some of your experiences in your practice as well, because I assume that you're dealing with the whole family, right? Rebecca, it's not just the client. You're also dealing with the daughter, the husband, the spouse, what have you, and what they are dealing with in terms of how can they help. Recognizing that some of these barriers of depression and the internalization of the challenge is out there as well. So we'll get back to that. Now, from that perspective comes a perspective of someone who I think we all know in this room is an extraordinary public policy advocate. She, in her new position, relatively new position now, not so new, as Secretary of Elder Affairs, can speak to her perspective on the challenges of addressing the aging population as we speak to these kinds of issues of loss of vision. Yes?
Thanks, Mike, and good afternoon, everyone. And it's absolutely wonderful to be here. I was in a little bit of a crazy Uber driving over, but managed to get my way here, and was just in time to hear Haben speak, and was really inspired by that, inspired by your comments. But I started my day today up in Danvers with the Chamber of Commerce there, and heard the speakers from May is the ALS month. So folks from ALS 1 and others, and talking about, Nancy spoke about her 27-year-old son who is ALS and, needs to be on a ventilator now. But, the progression as he, as you were saying, Rebecca, as, over time there was progression and he needed to accept more and more help. But what was so striking about that conversation and listening to the folks here today is that for me, it's talking about all different kinds of disabilities, all different kinds of, as you said, chronic conditions. And we really, in Elder Affairs today, we really are the state unit on aging and disability. And our mission is that we promote the independence, empowerment, and well-being of older adults, individuals with disabilities, and their caregivers. And all of those groups are really important. And it strikes me that, again, all of the talks I've heard today, very inspirational stories, are about the power of one person. It's about the power of advocacy. And you help us when we are in, a policy role, because the advocacy that you do to raise awareness, to talk about these issues, to make it a personal story, is incredibly valuable and helps us to think through what are the best public policy approaches to working with individuals who are getting older, who may have increasing needs over time, physical needs, needs related to vision loss, needs related to hearing loss, which of course we know is also a very significant problem in older adults. So I'm struck by the power of one person and one story, and I'm struck by the power also of getting together as a community, whether it's the community around people with ALS, whether it's the community of seniors wanting to help seniors and promote healthy, positive aging, or whether it's the community in this room today. You all create incredibly positive, a positive vibe, which is in this room today, and provide us with opportunities as well. So in terms of older adults who may be struggling with vision loss and may need to think about how they can accept help over time. We have, about 1 million people over age 65 in Massachusetts right now, but those numbers are going to triple in the coming decades. So, right now, maybe about half of the cities and towns have a third of the population over 65, but within the next 10 years, most of the cities and towns in Massachusetts will have at least a third of the population over 65. And by 2035, that it will be almost every city and town. So there's a demographic imperative here. Older adults are growing much more rapidly than ever before. When we think about the workforce and people who are available to provide care to older adults who may need care. People in the workforce are, for the first time since 1948, the number of people who are going to retire from the workforce outnumbers the new number of younger people coming into the workforce. So we have major issues we're looking at there as well. But we really from all around the state, and in the first year that I've been in this role, we've been fortunate, many of us on our team, to travel all around the state. We've been out to the Berkshires, we've been down to the Cape, and I think everywhere in between. And, people want the opportunities to stay in their own home, age in place, or in their community. They want to have positive experiences as they age. They want to keep volunteering. 25% of people over 65 volunteer in some way. Many people stay in the workforce. They want to continue to work. So I'm very interested today in thinking of how we can continue to meet people where they are and, help them to age the way they want to, where they want to, and provide the resources and access to the resources they need to live well and thrive in every single community. And so this community here is very important. I know Jim Bonnell was here. We were chatting. I don't see him. He must have gone to the other session. But, connecting with organizations like TIC and the TIC network that provide a type of comfort and a resource that is familiar to older adults, because they, radio is something people have grown up with, is very important, as well as all the newer technologies that are there as well. So we have a technology committee. We work with folks in many communities around new technology, and we're very, very grateful to be invited here today, and I look forward to the questions that you have for us and how we can support that all of the work that all of you are doing in your individual communities. So thank you.
Thank you, Alice. Yeah, I want to just put a marker on this point. Alice, you alluded to this. The disability and aging communities have a lot of overlap that's either apparent or, frankly, should be there. And I know that when we get to policy questions about how do we change the practice, whether it's a federal practice, state or local, how do we work together to affect that change? And the truth of the matter is that in the absence of a coordinated, conscious effort to connect the disability community of all ages with the aging community, we really are doing ourselves a disservice, because we can clearly accomplish more when we're working together in a conscious way. So now we have Ryan Knighton. Ryan, your resume, I was reading it and thinking, when people see this, it's like, OMG, an actor, a screenwriter, a speaker, actor, an author. I don't know, maybe there's some acting involved there. But certainly in all of the work you've done, we note that apparently, probably since certainly your professional life started, you've dealt with vision loss. And it has certainly not held you back. And in many ways, I think a lot of us are curious to know, in the challenges you faced, in whatever manifestation they were, what are the sharings you'd like to express to us to further understand how we can do our role in addressing whatever challenges that you faced and people like that have had a similar challenge?
The short answer is I don't know. But the other thing to add to my resume, I was also a forklift driver, and that didn't go very well. I was just going to tell you a story, because that's mostly what I trade in now. I wouldn't have become a writer unless I'd gone blind. That's for sure. And I've always associated I think about writing, I think about stories, and I think a lot about those issues through what blindness has taught me. And that's why I attribute the fact that blindness brought me to writing. If I hadn't gone blind, I'd be driving forklifts still, but probably better. So by way of demonstration of what I wanted to say, I was going to tell you a little story. Back in 2008, I think it was, I got invited to the Sundance Screenwriters Lab, which is run by the Sundance Film Festival. Robert Redford has built this strange cult of people who go up into the mountains and live in cabins. It's like 12 screenwriters, and you come up there and you work with veteran screenwriters on your screenplays. And I was adapting my first book, my memoir, Cockeyed, about losing my sight. And the first thing I want to point out is Hollywood is that effed up that they're inviting blind people in to write movies, to describe pictures for them. But they're also that progressive, in fact. So they had invited me in there to work on this script, and it's a very familiar feeling that you know, when you're blind, you walk into the world and you feel like you're unwanted, and you want to prove yourself there. And that's sort of been my stock and trade, is I like to go where I'm not wanted, because interesting things happen. So they brought me to this retreat to work on my script. I get in there at night. It's up in the Sundance Mountains in Utah. I have retinitis pigmentosa. I'm pretty advanced by this point. I don't see much other than a Rorschach ink blot of light in the daytime, and then nothing at night. And so they bring me up. We walk up this path in the dark through the forest. It's like a horror movie. And they take me to a cabin, and they leave me there for the night. And they say, we'll begin tomorrow morning at 7:30 at the Babbling Brook Lodge. Would you like somebody to come and get you and bring you down? And I thought, screw it. I'm 35 and I'm Canadian and I want to be like everybody else here. I can find my way back down. So I wake up and you can see where this is going. So I wake up in the morning, and the thing I had forgotten is that it was snowing, and it snowed all night. So the path disappeared. And I'm feeling with my cane outside my cabin and my independence, and there's nothing. And it is dead quiet, except way down the hill I can hear water, which I assume must be near the Babbling Brook Lodge. And it was about a 5-minute walk down, so I figured, well, I'll just head towards the water. And so I walk for 45 minutes, and I hit water with my cane, and it's sploosh, and I figure, okay, I must be near something. And so that's this way. Now I go this way, and I hit sploosh, and I go this way, and I hit sploosh. And I'm like, well, this is not good. So I back out, and I hit sploosh. So I'm now in like a flash flood in Utah. If I'm in Utah, I don't know. And there's nobody around. And I'm in the snow in the forest. And I'm Canadian, and that's ironic. But, so I just figure, screw it. I'll just stand here. And eventually, maybe somebody will notice the blind guy's missing. And they'll send dog sleds to find me. Now, I'm going to leave myself there for a minute and just back up for a second. Blindness began for me as a story problem. It is a physical problem, absolutely. I'm never going to diminish that stuff. But we don't talk about it as a story problem as well. So when I was 18, on my 18th birthday, they told me I had retinitis pigmentosa. That was the day I was diagnosed. And they said, you're going to go blind within about 5 years. And I want you to think about it this way. It's like if you woke up one morning and you got to choose what kind of story you get to be in. Nobody says drama. I want to be in a drama. You'd rather be in a comedy, you'd rather be in an adventure, you'd rather be in a romance. Nobody picks drama as the story they want to live. But that's actually what it feels like. It's like you're told the rest of your life is going to be a drama. And so I've spent most of my life trying to take control of my story so it's not a drama. Because I realized it's trying to take control of what the world around me is telling me my story is as well. I go back to Haben's speech, which just blew my hair back if I had any. I mean, she was so right about this taking control of your story. So as an example, when I wrote my memoir Cockeyed, I wrote a very tiny, like 3-sentence description of my diagnosis and telling the story. And because I'd read so many of these memoirs about people losing their sight, and they always just sort of roll around in the mud of the doctor moment. It's like a cheap pornographic melodrama moment. And I just didn't want to do that. Like, I didn't want to be telling the same story because it made me feel like I was living the same life as everybody else too. So it was my own private joke that I kind of left it like a blind spot in the book. You don't really get to see the doctor moment. And I cannot tell you, when I went on book tour, how many sighties came up to me after my talk and said, I was so moved by the doctor scene in your book. Which is awesome, because it tells you something really important. The story of what it is to be a blind person pre-exists you. People will put it on you even if you don't let them have it, right? And so the fight is to take control of your own image and your own story before the culture, with all that muscle, forces you into a cookie mold of what your story actually is. So in my case, what happened was I was diagnosed and I went through the obvious stuff that happens to people of depression, all those things. I was 18 years old. I had to stop driving. I had just started. I couldn't have, I had to give up my job, driving forklifts poorly. But I met 2 people. I was not using a cane yet. I was hiding it as long as I possibly could, which is its own story. But I walked out of a lecture hall because I went back to school because I realized I better do something with my mind if my body's giving out. And I was shuffling out of the lecture hall, and my professor, who was Canada's poet laureate at the time, a guy named George Bowering, was in his 60s. And he was standing beside me, and I had no idea. He was on a smoke break, and he pointed to me, and he said, you have retinitis pigmentosa, don't you? And I'm like, how did you know? And then he turns out his best friend of 50 years had the same thing. And he recognized the RP shuffle. What began then was a long relationship where George and his best friend Willie, who was blind with RP, took me out to the bar every Friday. And on my left side, George taught me everything about English literature and stories. And on my right side, Willie, the blind guy, told me I had stories, which was a big thing. And when people ask me what is the shift that happened, because I get a lot of parents of young people that are going blind asking, how do I get them to your happy place? The problem is that you're trying to make a shift from blindness as a loss of vision to blindness as a point of view. You didn't lose something. You have a point of view. It is a point of view. And it is a way of looking out on the world. And in my case, it makes the world very freaking funny, because it didn't imagine me in it. So I attacked the 2 main boogeymen of my own psychology, I realized, were the things I had to wrestle with. I mean, I can't talk about tech and adaptation and all those things. It's not my forte. But I can talk about this sort of psychological, spiritual, sort of cognitive dissonance I went through. And for me, it was boredom and embarrassment. Those were the 2 things that frightened me most. Not blindness, because I had the cane. I had the technology, I had the computer, but I was still wrestled with this feeling of boredom is going to get me if I'm safe all the time, and embarrassment is keeping me at home. And how do I control those things? How do I attack them? And what you do is you go where you're not wanted. Because as Spalding Gray said, and it's a line that actually changed my life, he said, I would rather tell my life than live it. Because when you tell the story of what happened to you, it can't hurt you anymore. It becomes funny. Drama becomes comedy, and other things. So I started going out into the world to places I wasn't invited. I started doing travel writing. I got sent to the revolution in Cairo by a magazine. I was like Forrest Gump going through the back of the CNN shots looking for water. Vice magazine sent me to the world's biggest rattlesnake roundup to hear what 1,000 rattlesnakes sound like. My life got very big when I thought it was going to get very small, because I took on a point of view instead of a disability. And it made the world interesting for other people because they'd never seen it that way before. So back to the drama. I'm stuck in the woods, and I wait like a good Boy Scout. And as is the nature of all drama, one thing will give away to another. You're never there forever. Something will happen, and if it's tragic, if it's dramatic, eventually it's going to become a good story, and that's what makes it all worthwhile, right? And so I'm waiting there, and I'm excited, because if I live, I've got a great story. In my house, that's what my daughter says whenever she hurts herself. She's like, well, at least I have a story. And so a smear of light comes towards me, and it drives through the sploosh, and this, it's blasting mariachi music out of an SUV, and this tiny Eastern European woman climbs out, and I know she's tiny because her voice is around my elbow, and she says, are you lost? And I'm like, I am so lost. And I don't know if she runs into lots of people with white canes in the mountains of Utah, but we are lost when we are out in the mountains of Utah. And so she says, can I help you? Are you trying to get to the lodge? And I said, yes. And then she did the whole, like, how do I help you? Do I fireman carry you? What do I do? And I'm like, great, I'll take your elbow. And I hitch my wagon. And she spins me around 5 feet and opens the door. It was right there. And it was, the water had sort of elbowed around the building, and I had just I just threaded right into the needle of it and caught myself in a little cul-de-sac at the corner of the building. And then when I got inside, of course, all the screenwriters were super jealous because I had a story. Thanks.
Oh, man, did you have a story?